Hey guys, YouTube 100 here. Okay, and now here I am with another review of a live action movie based on a cartoon. And next up for my next review, this is going to be a review for Mr. Magoo. Oh my gosh. Just, what can I say? This movie is absolutely atrocious. I mean, this movie is just an absolute disaster. This movie is just horrid. Just disgusting. It's just what can I even say? This film just it fucking sucks. Like seriously, it's just like such a horrible movie. I mean, this really is just like an example of like how bad these movies can get because this one is just an absolute oh, this is just an absolute atrocity. I mean, this film is just I freaking hate this movie, and a lot of other people do too. So yeah, this movie was released on Christmas Day in 1997, and just to give you an idea of like how hated this movie was, this movie was pulled from movie theaters after only 2 weeks. Yeah, I'm dead serious. 2 weeks after this movie was released, it was pulled from the theater. So, yeah, so that should tell you, like, right there, just like how negatively received this movie was. I mean, yeah. I mean, yeah, this movie is just like an utter disaster. Yeah. So, yeah. So, as far as like the Mr. Magoo cartoons, like, I honestly really never actually did watch the original Mr. Magoo cartoons. So, yeah. So, I really don't know, can't really like make a lot of comparisons to the cartoon. Yeah. But, yeah, from what I have heard about the cartoons, like, I really have like heard that like just they're really like there's nothing really special about them. I mean, they're like the cartoon was of course like meant for like it was like a comedy. It was like meant for comedy, but yeah, it really wasn't funny because yeah, pretty much like it's just like Mr. Magoo's really just like centered around one joke how Mr. Magoo can't see, like he's blind or nearsighted or whatever. Yeah, and yeah, and pretty much it's just that's pretty much just like all that this the cartoons are really about. Like that's pretty much like the theme of like Mr. Magoo. It's just that he can't see, and he's always kind of just like walking like into like he's meaning to walk to something, but he doesn't, and then yeah, then he like just like ends up like walking on walking in another direction, and it like it gets him into like a like into trouble. But yeah, he's like it's like something dangerous. Like he's like falling out of a window or something. But yeah, he always lands on something and he always ends up fine. But yeah, other people like end up getting hurt as well. But he always ends up just fine. So yeah, I mean that was pretty much like yeah, that was pretty much it. So nah, I really don't see like what's so funny about that. So yeah, so there really wasn't a whole lot to the Mr. Magoo cartoon. Yeah. So yeah, and this movie, I mean, I guess that's basically the same thing because it's it's also not funny, and yeah, and the characters are not interesting, and yeah, and the story is just useless. Like pretty much like the story for this film, all it basically is how like oh Ruby gets stolen from a museum, and then yeah, then Mr. Magoo is like suspected of stealing the ruby. So yeah, so like like the police, the CIA, the FBI, just a whole bunch of other forces are just like investigating to get evidence on Mr. Magoo stealing it. But when it turns out that like it was like other two other robbers have stolen it, yeah, and then yeah, then it just ends up like falling into like different hands. Like people like the robbers are like trying to steal the ruby back, and Mr. Magoo's not even aware that he actually does have it because of course like he can't see. So yeah, so that's basically like all this film really is about. Just like all these robbers like trying to get a hold of this like valuable ruby, and Mr. Magoo eventually does find out about it, and then he like like make sure that these robbers don't get the ruby. Yeah. So yeah, so I guess like the story of this movie, I guess it is kind of similar to the stories of like the Pink Panther movies. How like the Pink Panther diamond was is like very valuable and it like gets stolen and Inspector Clouseau like goes after it to recover the diamond. Yeah. So I guess like it is similar to the stories of like the Pink Panther movies, yeah. And speaking of the Pink Panther, like just on a side note, I just want to say real quick that I am not going to be talking about the Steve Martin Pink Panther movie in these reviews, yeah, because I know that there are like some people that are probably like thinking about that since like Pink Panther was a cartoon, but yeah, the Steve Martin Pink Panther movie is like it's not based on the cartoon; it's a remake of the old films from like the '60s all the way through the like the '90s. So yeah, the the Steve Martin Pink Panther movie is like a remake of those movies. It's not like based on the cartoon. So yeah, so I don't consider that to actually be like a live action film based on a cartoon. So yeah, so I am not going to be reviewing the Steve Martin Pink Panther movies for in case like anybody is wondering if I'm going to be talking about those in these reviews. So yeah, I'm not going to be talking about that. All right, but anyway, back to Mr. Magoo. Yeah, and it's just really not funny. I mean, just like like that like I said, just the pretty much the only joke in this movie is Mr. Magoo can't see. So yeah, yeah, and throughout the film, like he's like doing like all this stuff, like because he can't see, like there's like a whole bunch of jokes with him in like that he can't see, like whether he's a fishing or whether he's cooking, and whether he's like talking to people or whatever the case may be. Just yeah, it's a whole bunch of like bits with like just having like jokes about like Mr. Magoo's like nearsightedness, and yeah, and he's just like he can't see what's really going on. Yeah, so it's not funny, and the jokes are not funny. The characters are just absolutely uninteresting, and yeah, this movie is just like an absolute waste. Just like this is absolutely horrible. So yeah, like Nostalgia Critic said in his review for this movie, like if you can't see what's wrong with this movie, then you're just as nearsighted as this dumbass idea. I mean, yeah, because I like how anybody can actually like say that this movie that they actually liked it. Just yeah, I just don't even see how anybody can say that. Like yeah, just how can anybody actually think this movie is good? Because it's horrible. It is unbelievably stupid, and yeah, and it's just useless because it's really just like I said, the cartoon was really just based on one joke. So, like, who actually did think that it would be a good idea to make a movie out of this? Yeah. Well, apparently Disney did because yeah, they're the ones that made this movie. Yeah, and like Sasha Critic said in his review for this movie, like yeah, during the time that this movie was made, yeah, I mean Disney really did have like a really bad run with their live action movies. Like a lot of their live action movies that were coming out during this time, they just absolutely sucked. Like they were just awful. And this film is like a prime example of that. So yeah, just this movie, it just is absolutely horrible. It's unfunny. It's just uninteresting, and yeah, and it really is just like it really just I really do feel that like blind people or nearsighted people are really just like this film really did like piss them off, and I really do feel that that is like the main reason why this movie was only in theaters for 2 weeks. So yeah, I just don't know what else I can really say about it. Just it is an absolutely horrible movie and probably the worst of these films. I think this is probably like the worst live action movie based on a cartoon ever. It is just absolutely horrible. So yeah, so as far as my rating for the film, I give it an absolute zero, a zero. So 0 stars out of 4. It is that bad. So yeah. Okay, so yeah, so let me just talk about the film. All right. So the movie opens up like during with for the opening credits, like it does start with the original cartoon. Yeah, yeah. It shows Mr. Magoo like with his nearsightedness, like he can't see. Like as he's leaving his job, like he ends up like walking out the window, but he's like on a crane and like travels through like goes through like his vegetable factory because yeah, of course, like Mr. Magoo is like known as like a vegetable entrepreneur. Yeah, and then it shows like that he drives to a party, and then yeah, then eventually like turns into live action, and Mr. Magoo, who's played by Leslie Nielsen in this movie. So yeah, I feel so bad for Leslie Nielsen that he actually had to star in this movie. Like just oh, Leslie Nielsen, you poor soul. Yeah, yeah. It shows that Mr. Magoo like was attending a party at a museum, and then his nephew Waldo ended up like us meeting a woman named Stacy Sampenahuditra. Yeah, very long last name. It was played by Jennifer Gardner, and then yeah, then Waldo ended up like developing a crush on Stacy. Yeah, yeah. But then yeah, then after like Mr. Magoo like attempted to cut a ribbon and he ended up cutting an electrical cord or something. He ended up getting like stuck in like a closet in like a mummy's tomb in the museum. Yeah. Then later that night, two jewel thieves, who were uh, Luann Lesueur and Bob Morgan, ended up stealing a ruby in the museum that was known as the Star of Kuristan. Yeah, yeah. And Mr. Magoo like was around for the robbery, but yeah, him being nearsighted, he really didn't know what was going on. Yeah, and then then the two were able to escape from the museum with the ruby, and they were gonna bring it to Bob's boss named Austin uh, Cloquet. Yeah, yeah. Then the following day, as Mr. Magoo went fishing with his dog Angus, then like the two thieves ended up picking up a fight, and then they ended up losing the ruby that ended up landing in Mr. Magoo's boat, unbeknownst to Mr. Magoo. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Then later on, then like at the museum, the curator Ader, along with Stacy, ended up bringing in two agents to investigate and they were like a CIA agent named Gustav Anders and an FBI agent named Chuck Stepak, and yeah, then they were just like trying to uh, track down the ruby and spy on Mr. Magoo because yeah, they believed that Mr. Magoo ended up stealing the ruby. Yeah, yeah. Then yeah, then and after Stacy mentioned that like she was invited to the opera where the Magoos ended up uh, the Magoos are going to be out that night. Then the two agents then visited the opera to try to look for Mr. Magoo, who was actually in the opera. Then eventually Mr. Magoo ended up coming across Luann, who was like pretending to be a reporter and undercover FBI agent under the name Prunella Pagliacci. Yeah, yeah, and it showed how Mr. Magoo ended up taking a liking to her, then the next morning, as Luing and Mr. Magoo like were out together, she eventually ended up like like pretended to injure her ankle, and then like got Mr. Magoo to take her into her house. Yeah, yeah. Then after the agents then discovered a notebook with Luing's fingerprints, they then realized that Mr. Magoo was with her, and so then they were like they then went to Mr. Magoo's house and were snuck in to look for the ruby. Yeah, yeah. And then as Mr. Magoo and Luann then arrived at the house, then as Mr. Magoo then was attempting to prepare some food, then we got this really idiotic scene with like him like making a chicken and like trying to follow a cooking show, but then Angus then like discovered the ruby and brought it in and tried to get Mr. Magoo's attention to it, and then he ended up like touching the TV remote and it was changing the channel to like a workout show and a woodworking show and all that, and yeah, and you had like Mr. Magoo like thinking that like what they were saying in like the workout and the woodworking show was like ways to prep the chicken. Yeah, and then you had this like whole thing with like him holding the chicken up in the air and sanding it, and yeah, just absolutely stupid. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I didn't even laugh once at this movie. Like the humor was really that bad. Like it got zero laughs out of me. It was just absolutely some of the unfunniest stuff I've ever seen. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, continuing. Yeah, yeah. Then eventually, uh, Bob ended up sneaking into the house and he found the ruby. But then after like he ended up getting caught stealing it, then he ended up like stealing Mr. Magoo's Studebaker to flee from the scene, and then Mr. Magoo, Waldo, and Luann then gave chase after him with Mr. Magoo's eggplant mobile for his business. Yeah, yeah, but then Bob was able to escape, and then he brought the ruby to Austin. Yeah, and they were showing how like Austin was like having like this auction plan for like his other fellow criminal associates from all around the world. Yeah, and it showed that like Mr. Magoo like after finding out about this, like Mr. Magoo and Waldo and then like tried to sneak in to get the ruby back. Mr. Magoo disguised himself as a fellow thief named Ortega Peru, who but the other thieves like knew who Ortega Peru was, and they like said that he never goes anywhere. But yeah, he like Mr. Magoo posing said that like he was joining the auction in a he was like seeing this because doing this and he was just like posing as a Ortega Peru and this auction was like in a communal indoor pool but then as they showed like all the thieves like had tattoos Mr. Magoo like put like this fake tattoo on his chest, but he eventually ended up getting discovered when the tattoo washed away in water. But before like they could do anything, Luan then ended up stealing the ruby back, and then escaped on a snowmobile, and then yeah, then Mr. Magoo then like tried to give chase on an ironing board, and then he just went through like a women's skiing competition. Yeah, then yeah, and then eventually then like uh, Mr. Magoo and Waldo then discovered that Luan is actually like uh, heading to um heading to Brazil to actually give the ruby to the real Ortega Peru. Yeah, yeah. So then they they followed her over to Brazil, and then then after Mr. Magoo ended up scaring Ortega's girlfriend, then he stole a bridal dress from her, and then then during like a wedding ceremony between the real Ortega Peru who and what was supposed to be his girlfriend, then Mr. Magoo then revealed himself and stole the ruby. Then he attempted to escape from her, and then he was able to escaping on a raft, and then it showed how as it was going over a waterfall, it was inverted into a parachute for Mr. Magoo to float down safely, and then it ended with Mr. Magoo and Waldo returning the ruby to the museum, and Ortega, Luan, and all of their associates were arrested, and then it showed Mr. Magoo who then walking off with Angus, and then it turned into the cartoon again, and then we had another hijinks with Mr. Magoo's nearsightedness as he was walking up a model dinosaur, and then as he was falling down, he got onto a surface and then landed just fine. And before the movie actually then cut to credits, then it just had a disclaimer that saying it was not meant to insult blind or nearsighted people and stuff. Which doesn't really make sense because Nostalgia Critic said in his review for the movie how just the disclaimer was in very small text, and since it was just directed towards blind and nearsighted people, how would they even be able to read that? So pretty dumb disclaimer. Yeah, and that's how the movie ended. So that's pretty much the premise for the movie. But like I said, there's a whole bunch of jokes involving Mr. Magoo's nearsightedness, and none of them are funny. I like that cooking scene I was talking about. There's one where he's talking to a baboon or a mandrill or whatever, thinking that it's a kid. And he also at one point he was attempting to kiss the wind, but ended up kissing a fish instead. And that scene where he was going fishing, his rod caught onto Bob, and he thought it was a fish, and he reeled it back. There's just a whole bunch of unfunny jokes with Mr. Magoo's nearsightedness in this movie, and none of them are funny. They are just so stupid, and this movie's stupid, and I mean, it's not really hard to see why this movie was pulled from theaters after only 2 weeks. Just this movie's just absolutely horrible, and it deserves all the hate that it has gotten over the years. So like I said, I give the film 0 stars out of 4. It is that bad. So definitely do not watch this film. I definitely just say skip over this film and just pretend it doesn't exist because it is that bad. Just watch any of these other films I'm going to be talking about over this one. This film really is that bad. Even watch the Flintstones movies over this and watch the Ninja Turtles over this because, yeah, Yeah, those films, like as bad as they are, this one is a million times worse. So yeah, just stay away from this movie like the freaking plague. Do not watch it at all. All right. So yeah, so I guess this is all I can really say about it. So yeah, so just screw Mr. Magoo, screw Mr. Magoo the movie. Just yeah, yeah, just screw everything having to do with Mr. Magoo because this movie is an absolute atrocity. All right, so yeah, so this is my review of Mr. Magoo. All right, so yeah, but yeah, yeah, so yeah, like I said, like this film was done by Disney, yeah, and with this being such a horrible film, do you think that Disney would learn their lesson? Well, a couple of years after this movie, then Disney decided to do another live action adaptation of another certain cartoon, and I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about, and we'll talk about that next time. So stay tuned for my next review coming up next of another certain live action movie based on a cartoon done by Disney. All right, but this is from our review of Mr. Magoo. So I hope you guys did enjoy this review. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.